records, well, one old guy for now, while Sydney's lockdown restrictions remain intact. Mike and I have decided to press on and have a bit of fun with these segments and discussing our love for our records. Okay, so the last few episodes we've been looking at original versions versus cover versions. Okay, and it's caused a bit of a discussion out there, we can see. And before we go on today with today's choice, okay, I'd like to look at what Graham Mandrulis from Beverly Hills sent us, his favourites, and they include Celebration by Dragon, Can't Help Falling in Love, UB40, I Fought the Law, The Clash, We've Got to Get Out of This Place, The Angels, where we looked at that yesterday, You Really Got Me, Van Halen, and Alien Ant Farm's Smooth Criminal. Graham Mandrulis from Beverly Hills, thank you very much for your input here. Some great choices. I love your Alien Ant Farm, Smooth Criminal. Great song, okay? As well as some of the other classics also. Now, I'm going to be very, very controversial today, okay? Now, I've chosen Chuck Berry's Rock and Roll Music. It's off this EP, his greatest hits EP off Chess Records. It's got Memphis, Maybelline, Nardine, and Rock and Roll Music. Now, Chuck Berry, what do you say about Chuck Berry? He's the father of rock and roll. He was there at the beginning. Yes, Elvis was churning out, the #1 singles in 1955, such as Don't Be Cruel and Heartbreak Hotel. But, Chuck was instrumental in getting R&B music, introducing these new elements, and creating rock and roll. So, Chuck, had been playing the musical circuits for a while, leading up to the mid-50s. It's Muddy Waters that introduces him to Chess Records, and then with Chess Records, he makes Maybelline. And Maybelline goes to #1 in the R&B charts, and that's it. Okay, so Chuck Berry is on his way, and he has this string of songs that are, top 10 hits, like for example, Roll Over Beethoven, right? That's another big hit. So he does rock and roll music, and for me, rock and roll music epitomizes the new sound, the new music that teenagers are embracing, because this is the first music that teenagers are embracing as their own. They're not following their parents with those big bands anymore. They're listening to their own music, and Chuck is there pushing those boundaries. And it didn't matter whether it was African American kids or white kids, because he was an African American artist who was bringing rock and roll into middle class American youth. Right, so Chuck is there, and I love rock and roll music. Think about the lyrics. Okay, it's got a backbeat, you can't lose it. Any old time you use it. Okay, gotta be rock and roll music if you want to dance with me. That's the greatest message for rock and roll. If you want to dance with me, you gotta be rock and roll, and that was it. So, great song, high energy, but I think the high energy of the song epitomizes also Chuck Berry as an artist, because think about his showmanship on stage. He had this huge presence, right? Okay, he had the guitar, he introduced the guitar solo, he had the duck walk. He was out there, right? He was pushing the boundaries in so many ways as an African American with his new music. So Chuck, an amazing artist, rock and roll music, amazing. Now I'm gonna be very, very controversial today, okay? Because I'm gonna introduce the cover version, and that is the Beatles version. Okay, this is off an EP, Beatles for Sale, with 3 originals and 1 cover, which is rock and roll music. Now the Beatles were playing Chuck Berry songs ever since, the Quarrymen, as early as that. They played it at Hamburg. That was part of their sets. So they loved Chuck Berry, They really, really, adored him, adored his music. They got like all of us, So yes, they do a version of rock and roll music for Beatles for Sale. At the time, they were churning out 2 albums a year because Beatlemania had set in. And of course there was a bit of pressure to come up with original songs, And of course, Beatles decided they were probably struggling. They were struggling to fill up their album with original songs, so they decided to do cover versions. Now they did two Carl Perkins ones, I think, Honey Don't and Everyone Wants to Be My Baby. They do a Buddy Holly song, Words of Love, and they chose to do Rock and Roll Music. That's not the first time they did a Chuck Berry cover. They did also Roll Over Beethoven, right? So yes, they're very, very, very familiar with Chuck Berry. Okay, but it wasn't only just to fill in the album, but I think the Beatles also chose to do a lot of American cover versions because they were after the American market. So here are all these cover songs, such as Chuck Berry's, that the American market would identify with. They weren't choosing English cover versions, they were choosing American songs, right, to cover. So I think that was very, very important for the Beatles to continue to tap into the American market, and Chuck Berry is one of the people that they idolised, and of course they did it. Now, can I just say that their version of Rock and Roll Music is amazing. Can I say, to cause controversy, it really, really stands up to the original. John Lennon's vocals are so strong and powerful. There is a high energy. Now, I think the difference between, people like Chuck Berry or, other bands is you have four accomplished musicians. So John is on vocals here, but he has got a hot band behind him. There's a lot of energy there. He might be singing, but Paul is there on the backing vocals, George is there, and it's like a really great team, behind him. So I think the piano is also, it is just so there, it's so powerful also. I'm not sure who's playing, is it John or is it George Bunn? I'm not sure who's playing there, but the piano really adds to the song. So yes, Rock and Roll Music, the Beatles. Maybe, yes, I know it's controversial for me saying that it is a great version, arguably better than the original, but maybe to stop the argument, I'd like to sort of finish off by saying that John Lennon said years afterwards that if rock and roll could change its name, it would be called Chuck Berry. And maybe that's the best way of putting it. He was the greatest, arguably the greatest band in the world, the Beatles, and they do a version of an idol, someone that they idolise, Chuck Berry, the father of rock and roll, and they come up with a killer version. That's the controversy. I leave it to you which one you prefer, Chuck Berry's Greatest Hits or Chuck Berry's Rock and Roll Music or the Beatles cover version. I leave that to you. Please leave a comment. For discussion. We've got one more episode of cover versions versus originals versus cover versions. Okay, one more tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. All the very best, and thanks for tuning in. See you soon.